Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Gregg and Joe Turbo Show, the fastest growing podcast on the IBM YouTube channel. Uh, Today, we're super lucky to have our guest. It's actually our first guest from the future, which is fantastic. That'll make sense in a few minutes, I think. But we have Senior Product Manager Dieter Vangrunderbeek. Hopefully, I got that name right. Last name? Okay, so. All right. I'll tell you what, we've had Adam Beagle-Eisen on the episodes prior.
Yep.
Something about you Apptio guys with the tough last names. But
Hey, yo. What's the
hey,
matter with
wow,
my
just
tough last name?
well, yeah. I guess me too, actually. I got the SF thing going on.
Yeah.
All right, so we're all in trouble. But no, thank you for joining. Tell us a little about yourself. Who is Dieter? Where do you live? How is the future? What does tomorrow look like? Help us out.
Yeah, hey Greg, hey Joe. Thank you for having me. Fan of the show for sure. Love the little theme you guys got going in the intro as well. Yeah, no, I wish I was truly in the future, but I guess yeah, I'm based in Sydney, Australia, which there's a couple of countries still ahead of us, but not that many. But yeah, it's kind of early morning here, so if you see me yawning through the show, it's not because of a lack of interest. It will just be because of early morning time here. But yeah, so as you said, senior product manager for Apptio. I've been with Apptio actually in a couple of weeks. It'll be 10 years.
Wow.
So kind of nice
That's a heck of a tenure.
anniversary. Yeah, and it's in Australia they do this thing as well where they give you they call it long service leave, so that might be a nice extra where you kind of get a month of leave that at some point in the future, not directly, I'll look to consume. But yeah, I've been with Apptio for 10 years. My background actually is mainly not in product management, but in kind of delivery. So I started off as kind of the second consultant that was hired in the APAC region, and then did consultancy for a lot of our APAC customers, and then probably the bulk of my time was actually kind of managing the delivery team, so our professional services team, or as IBM probably calls it, the expert labs team.
Right.
So that was for about 5 years. I did that. The team was growing, our market was growing. So we kind of started with some big strategic customers in Australia first, but now we've got a bigger footprint, I guess, across APAC. So yeah, and then it was really last year. So we've got our annual conference, which is mainly around TBM, Technology Business Management. That annual conference is typically around the October timeframe. And that's kind of when I switched over. Just before that, that's when I switched over into product management. So been in that role now for about 6 months.
So in that role as a product manager, what products do you oversee or are a product manager for within Apptio and eventually within IBM?
Yeah, so in Apptio, so if I take like a step back for a second, so Apptio really has three product lines. So there is what we call ApptioOne, which is the product line that I'm a product manager in or of. That's really kind of our flagship product, right? So Apptio started around 16 years ago. In fact, there was around the kind of the GFC time. Our kind of founder, was being told like, crazy time to start a business, but he did it anyway, and it was pretty successful. And at the time, his kind of starting idea was pretty simple. It was, if you think of like sales guys, like they'll have Salesforce. If you think of the finance people, they'll have like their SAP or Oracle ERP tool. If you think of HR, they'll have like Workday, but there wasn't really a purpose-built tool, I guess, out there really for kind of targeting the CIO and kind of technology leaders out there. And so he really started with the idea of building that purpose-built tool, and that's kind of like where Apptio started from or grew from. you'll hear terms like cost transparency, like that was kind of probably one of the earliest names that we used. Anyway, fast forward to now we've got 3 product lines. So ApptioOne, that's one that I'm responsible for. I'm one of, I think, 6 product managers within that product. Then we've got and then that's I'll come back to kind of more like the frameworks that are underpinning those products as well. But the second product is cloudability, and then the third product is kind of target process. And so where we started from ApptioOne, cloudability and target process were acquisitions with it going back 3-4 years ago, I would say. But I think the interesting thing, even when I joined Apptio like 10 years ago, what I found quite interesting was it wasn't just like products. Like we had, quite early on, they kind of understood that for this to be really a long-term, kind of business value-driven thing out there, they had a framework that they created as well. So I think I mentioned TBM earlier. So
yes.
Technology Business Management.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a framework really trying to, I guess, have technology leaders run their business, in a meaningful way so that the business can understand. So to have a kind of common bridge and common language. And so as much as Apptio was kind of promoting their products, obviously, they also wanted to create that category, that framework out there to be adopted by like the CIO leaders, right? To the point that now, technology business management is its own council, has been for a while. It's got many CIO leaders from the globe sitting in that council. And if you think even to the other 2 products, they're underpinned by their own frameworks as well. Right, so like ApptioOne will have their technology business management framework, but then cloudability leverage the FinOps framework, and then target process really leverage the kind of the SAFe framework.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of an interesting thing of like, and obviously Apptio is not alone in that sense, but it's kind of like as much as we want to promote our products, maybe even more important, so like we want to create those frameworks and have that be adopted even by our competitors, so to make sure that those frameworks kind of resonate out there in the industry.
Yeah, I think like a standard taxonomy and set of sort of best practices is always a good idea. And in a lot of ways, is also good marketing for Apptio, right? Because I know Apptio was sort of the foundation of a lot of those things, in terms of the FinOps Foundation and TBM. So yeah, to your point, it's great. And it's been fun to learn for me. I know I've spent a bunch of time since the acquisition. Obviously, we've all been training up on the Apptio stuff, and learning about it has been it's been awesome. It's a lot, but it makes sense. So
yeah, and just one thing I was going to add was quite funny yesterday. I think it's funny, but let's see. Yesterday a couple of us were on a call with Forrester, the analyst firm, and this was around, let's say, ApptioOne and ServiceNow better together, which we can come back to later on. But we obviously we talked about TBM and ServiceNow's got a framework called CSDM and how there's synergies between those, and the fact that in last year's conference the TBM Council kind of highlighted the fact that they're opening up, I guess, the TBM Council to more active partners, companies like Flexera and others and Accenture, and so to really make sure that TBM is truly being perceived out there as a framework that really invites all those partner companies into the conversations. And the analyst yesterday said, well, I'm still waiting for the day that you guys invite the likes of Magic Orange and Nikes. Those are companies that are direct competitors in our technology financial management space. So anyway, let's see. It was an interesting point he made, and completely out of our hands, but let's see what happens in that space.
Yeah, for sure. You've mentioned a couple of times that the target audience for ApptioOne is like a CIO. Are there other personas that product caters to?
Yeah, look, definitely. So I think the CIO, right, is really our target, I guess, buying persona. But it's fair to say that, not in all cases that's going to happen. Hopefully he's involved, and with any software product, I guess, sponsorship is key, right? Sponsorship is key, not just to the buying phase of the product, but even more so, kind of ensuring that the value is being
absolutely
perceived within the organization.
Yeah, that word sponsorship is near and dear to my heart in Expert Labs.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, so like you could argue, like, like if you kind of go down the ladder a little bit, not that I want to paint the picture as a full hierarchy out there, but I think what is crucial is that there might be even more success if your buying persona is actually sitting below that CIO, because the closer you can, minimize the gap between the buying persona versus really the team of people who are going to have to run and really work with the software and extract the value out of that. The closer the gap is, or the closer the understanding between those personas is, literally the higher the success rate will be of them obtaining value out of Apptio. And so those other personas would be finance. So like, and when I say finance, we often mean like IT finance. So not necessarily corporate finance, even though that could be an extension. So IT finance or technology finance, because this again comes back to technology business management, right? So our core is built around technology business management. Interestingly enough, EBM, enterprise business management, is an extension that some of our more mature customers do really get into, and that's when I guess you start to expand the scope and the footprint of what Apptio focuses on from pure technology into enterprise wide systems like financial reporting systems and whatnot. But anyway, IT finance is definitely a strong persona. Then you could say, these days we tend to call it like solution owners, which is let's say your application owner, your service owner, or now maybe more your product owner, right? So a lot of our customers are kind of moving into that more product focused view of the world, where they're looking more after capabilities and even value streams and those type of things. And then it's like the business as well, because ultimately, IT is kind of providing services that are being consumed by, either other, departments within an organization, be it HR, legal, finance, and whatnot, or IT could be truly a provider to true end consumers. And so, especially if we look to kind of grow our footprint with users out there, we want to make sure that we're kind of touching on those true end users, because those are like the bigger masses of user volumes that we want to get to, right? We don't necessarily want to have Apptio. Yes, it needs to land with the IT folks and they're going to kind of run with it, but we need to make sure it can kind of expand and reach the value to those true end consumers as well.
And to that end, I mean, I know ApptioOne does a lot, and it is, it like you said, it touches a lot of folks across the organization. But I guess, is the platform sort of, are there different pieces of the platform? Like, is it like, like, well, I guess what is the core of ApptioOne, and then what are sort of the other pieces that have maybe sort of grown over time to, like you said, to meet the needs of our customer base and to provide value more broadly?
Yeah, really good question. I mean, so ApptioOne does consist of different things within it, right? So I think the bread and butter of ApptioOne still is what we would refer to as cost transparency, or what will now be renamed come 1st of May, right? So, I mean, maybe most people on the podcast will know that, but
do we have an exclusive? You heard it here first.
No. I was gonna back up for a minute and make sure that people are aware that Apptio was acquired by IBM, which hopefully people will know about because we're on the podcast together. But no, like, so our kind of transfer of business will happen 1st of May, right? And so to do that, a lot of the folks in Apptio have been working behind the scenes to really start to align with the kind of the product packaging and naming of I guess how IBM tiers their things, right? And so that will, like, I'm looking at our website, and like, our website will go through a transition and whatnot. So everything I say, I'll have to kind of say with, double naming at this time, but I'm sure a lot of the old school Apptions and even customers will try to hold on to, what they're used to saying. Like even in our own transition over those 10 years, people are often so much still using cost transparency as kind of the starting point for ApptioOne.
Yeah.
And last year at our conference, when some of the people were presenting, they were bringing up statistics that were, still quite shocking. Like statistics, like I think it was from Gartner, saying that 64% of the CIOs still don't believe they've got adequate transparency into their IT costs, right? Which is quite shocking if you think about how long us and other competitors have been around. But it still goes to that point that even today, when we go into some large prospects, our main competitors often still Excel. Like you'll have you'll have very knowledgeable people that have built up really cool stuff through Excel, but there will always be that moment that just doesn't scale, or it will fall over, or it will just not.
What happens when that person leaves, and then
exactly.
Like
exactly, right.
It all falls apart.
But so cost transparency, or what will now become called like costing, and we'll have like a costing essentials, which is really tailored to, let's say, that what we call the earlier mature customers, which have like a kind of typically an IT spend that will be maybe lower than 150 million USD. So we'll have a costing essentials, and then we'll have a costing standard, right? And this is all about, hey, we want to bring transparency and give you understanding into the IT expenses that you're incurring within IT, right? And we touched on technology business management, and Joe, you mentioned like the taxonomy. We kind of pair that up with like that 16 years of knowledge of how do you best allocate things in a meaningful way, and how can you drive iterative value as you start to build up what we refer to as like a best practice cost model, right? And so and we're like, it's kind of important, like when we build up a cost model, this is where we start from a financial layer where, yes, like we focus on bringing the general ledger and consider that the source of truth when we do this modeling exercise. And that's quite different from some other products that have been out there in the market, where sometimes they'll just take like a rate card driven approach, which is a fine approach as well. But again, it's more assumptive, it's more rate card driven. We need that buy-in from that finance persona to start with, to make sure we're all kind of starting from that same viewpoint, right? And so in that costing journey, we will start from that financial layer, and we will bring in a general ledger, and then we'll start to bring in other sources of data to really unpack and uncover, what is your labor, like what are your labor people working on? Like what is like a unit rate that your labor folks are having per location, or per job function or whatnot. Then we'll start to bring in like big vendor bills, right? Vendor and outsourced IT, such typically big footprint, that we want to help understand and unpack that into like logical IT functional domains, which we come then to this concept called IT towers. And IT towers is crucial to the TBM taxonomy. It's really, again, trying to represent the financial IT expenditure into buckets that hopefully both IT and the infrastructure and services folks of this world can kind of commonly understand, right? Because as much as we're talking about products and technology here, so many times when we've gone into a customer, it's like in the initial phases when we start with Apptio, it's almost like we're doing a dating service between the finance folks sitting over there in the organization and the infrastructure guy or the service application owner sitting at the other side. And it's crazy. Like I see that as true value delivered quite soon. Like we literally are bringing those people together to look at a common way of explaining technology and kind of bringing that transparency into technology, right? And so when I talk about towers, it's like we're now saying if you start with 1 million of a general ledger of IT expenses, we're now expressing that into buckets like how much is my compute spend, how much is my storage spend, how much is my network spend, how much is my IT management spend, how much am I spending on end user, etc. Right. And so anyway, I know I'm going quite deep here, but maybe I'll take a step back.
That's great.
Yeah.
Costing is really kind of our starting point in ApptioOne, because you want to, again, bring that cost, and where we do bring iterative value and reporting on all these levels. You can ask me, hey, I was talking to one of the Turbo guys the other day, is like, because we're looking at ultimately sharing some of those costs back into Turbo, and he's like, can you give me the unit cost of a server? I'm like, yeah, that's kind of that's exactly what we do pretty much every day. And it's you'll hear us using like TCO a little times, right? Total cost of ownership. Because again, because of that layered cake model that we build up, we've got the ability to give at any point in the model the total cost of ownership of, let's say, a server, right? Which would be, hey, there's the direct expenses that if I'm the owner of a server that I am aware of and I control directly, whether it be my hardware that's still depreciating or whether it be OS licenses or whatnot. But then there'll also be the indirect pieces of, I'm sitting in a data center potentially, and therefore I'm consuming, power and data center costs.
Yeah.
There's network costs, etc. But the strong personas, I do have to still say, are when we get higher up in the model, when we get to those application and services, and those owners are typically, that's kind of the North Star where a lot of people and still tend to buy Apptio for. It's to get to that application TCO or service TCO view, right? And when we get to that, because of the power of the platform, we don't just give them that number. We give them all these dimensions that they can pivot on, whether it's an infrastructure lens or more of a financial lens, right? Where they can pivot on to understand the composition of the TCO of the application and service. And then more importantly, how can they then start to present that to the consumers of these services so that the business understands what IT is providing them, not just from a cost perspective, but ultimately also from a value perspective, right? Because that's kind of like our tagline, like trying to pair up technology investments and driving value out of those technology investments.
Yep.
And so costing, starting point number one, when we get to that higher point, this is where billing becomes, right, the next step in people's journey. Ultimately, IT wants to present their organization a bill of IT in which they're saying, hey, Mr. Business, like this is how much you're consuming of IT. Are you aware of that? And here are some of the potential levers you can pull and play with to really start to change your consumption, right? So maybe there are services, maybe they want to move everybody away from standard laptops and they want to go into a bring your own device type of service. Okay, well, to do that, what's kind of like the transition plan here? IT ultimately also needs to understand what they're charging to the business in a way versus what it's actually costing, right? To give kind of like a recovery variance analysis at that level.
Yep.
So I would definitely say costing, billing, planning as well, right? So it's costing, billing, planning. Planning is definitely the third big pillar. Like we've got a kind of an IT purpose-built planning tool, which again allows IT to budget, forecast, and then start to look at those variances across their actuals. So those would be the 3-4 pillars within ApptioOne: costing, planning, billing, and then there's like extra, extra wins if you want. Benchmarking. Benchmarking is something that, if you think about Apptio, it's got roughly 1,500 customers globally. That represents close to, and probably more now, more than 650 billion of IT spend that sits across our systems, right? And if you go back to like one of the reasons why IBM bought us, yes, it's obviously for the IP and ApptioOne and Cloudability and Target Process as products, but it's also, of kind of the spend that we're kind of covering, right? And so I think that's where, not necessarily this year, but I think in the back end, we're kind of already working towards that, but especially next year, if you think of a world where benchmarking and what's the next from IBM are going to come together and really going to start to make like predictive like insights into where IT is going with its spend, then I think that's going to be super valuable for our customers out there.
Yeah, one of the things you were talking about was is feeling like you're a matchmaker running a dating site. But when you first get into these customers, you've got to be able to bridge that gap between infrastructure and application teams. And that's absolutely something that I understand, and I've been through multiple times. When we get into these engagements with customers, 9 times out of 10, you're talking to an infrastructure engineer, and you say, "What's this application?" No idea. Well, what service does it run on? Couldn't tell you. So that like that application portfolio, what the applications do, how they operate, even who would be a product owner or who's responsible for an application. there's a pretty big disconnect between infrastructure teams and those application teams a lot of times when you come into these places. And watching those teams come together and watching infrastructure engineers learn more about applications and application teams understanding what infrastructure teams are doing and watching them work together, it's pretty rewarding. So you make those matches, you step back and you go, "Ah, that was a good one. That worked out."
I think that's the mark of like good technology, though, right? And like good tech doesn't just solve technical problems, right? It solves the human problem, which is, as humans, we struggle to work together well, and especially in these environments where things are already very segmented, and we have our own language and our own, way of doing things. To work cross-functionally becomes very difficult. And so good tech, like you said, Greg, is like, I mean, it's helping to kind of break down those barriers, and it's great to see those breakthroughs happen when we work with customers, and I think clearly the mark of a great platform. So
and I think it's a good segue into well, in a way, now that Apptio has become part of IBM, right? Like a lot of things that we're now doing is kind of learning each other as well, right? And so I'm like, when I talked about like costing, planning, billing, like one area of focus for me specifically is what we call like ApptioOne technology integrations, right? So ApptioOne as a platform and as a tool relies and needs to consume a lot of information.
Yeah. I mean, what does ApptioOne do on its own without that information?
Yeah, nothing really. Like, because we actually, we don't want, like, our bread and butter is in the best practices of allocating cost and visualizing those things and whatnot. And we've got a really powerful platform that helps us do that. And we've got those best practices that we bring to the table. But we don't necessarily want to be the custodian or the source of truth for any core data, right?
Yes.
But so yeah, what we've been trying to do, we're probably starting like last year, or even a little bit before that, is really, in the past, we would just kind of like, we have a tool called DataLink, which is really our ETL tool in how we try to automate the consumption of these financial sources, infrastructure sources, and whatnot. But we really want to elevate it to a bit more of a end-to-end kind of like technology integration / partnership, right? So as in, we don't just want to like drop the data there and have our customers or our own professional services have to figure out, okay, how does this data really link to a use case? How does that use case really deliver value to our consumers? And so that's why we're kind of now more focused on technology integrations. And one of them, given that we're now part of IBM, that we see quite a lot of value in is actually Turbonomic. And I'll link back to that because of your point, Greg, of like those personas, right? And so if I just, like, I've got one slide here that I think, visualizes a little bit where I think there's a really nice synergy, even if we just start from the persona perspective first. Like on the Apptio side, like it is fair to say that, where we do, go through that model exercise and we have a lot of infrastructure data that we bring in, our strongest personas are not, let's say, the I&O folks of the world. Like, yes, you'll have like a head of infrastructure or VP of infrastructure kind of come in and look at some of the numbers. But in the past, it's fair to say that we haven't really like have been that successful with some of these infrastructure owners. Like our strong personas, as you can see on this slide, are more on kind of that right side, which is like the finance people, the business, the solution owners, right? Yeah. And so even before going into, I guess, the actual value that sits underneath this is, I think, where, Turbonomic obviously is very strong and has that kind of optimization tool to play in that space with I&O. But this is where I think where just bringing those two kind of sets of owners and personas together will, I think, really help. Like if you think about, okay, you guys are generating really powerful optimization recommendations, but back to your point, Greg, it's kind of in the hands of I&O folks. They might not actually have the context of, the app owner or service owner in terms of what they're trying to drive, right? And equally, finance, like when we started pitching some of these things to our existing joint customers that already have ApptioOne and Turbonomic, finance owners on the Apptio side love to see what we refer to as like actionable insights. Apptio is a really powerful platform. We got tons of out-of-the-box reports, but a lot of times there's still a couple of extra steps you really need to take to go from saying, okay, well, you're saying that I can potentially avoid these costs or have potential savings here, but how am I really going to action these things? And that's what really excites me about what Turbo can bring in, because with Turbo, obviously, you're generating these recommendations. We would bring them into Apptio. We would kind of quantify, especially if you think of the on-prem side of it, we would quantify that, because that's kind of what we can do on our side. And then we can bring those two personas together and say, hey, now just kind of agree on this and start to action it, right? And then you've got the powerful automation capabilities on the Turbo side that can really bring this from just like a theoretical conversation yesterday into a real action thing that was taken and automated hopefully tomorrow. And so
what I love about this is these solution owners and these business and finance owners, the right hand side of this slide that you're talking about, they already have these habits and these behaviors of going to Apptio, looking at these costs and understanding and wrapping their heads around them. And what it feels like to me is Turbonomic can give them those dials and switches and levers for how they can affect those costs, right? I've got this solution. It's it produces widgets on a web page for people, and it brings in $250,000 a month, right? If I was to look at this and say, I've never once had a performance issue, and this Turbonomic tool, or I don't even need to know about Turbonomic. I'm in Apptio still, and suddenly I've got this insight that says, hey, you're way over provisioned on CPU, and you could save yourself $1,000 a month, or $12,000 a year just by taking this one action, going from 4 to 2 CPUs. It's powerful for an application owner to see that and be able to internalize it and say, yes, I'm willing to take that risk or take that action to affect my costs against a critical platform that I know is bringing in that revenue. And I can do it in a way that I don't have to go and monkey around and figure out to make that decision for myself, right? And that's one of the most powerful things that I try to bring to my customers in Turbonomic, is to say, the first step that we do with Turbonomic is we automate the decision about what to do. And that automated decision is then manually accepted or manually taken by someone, and we look and see what the outcome is, and we build that trust back into policies in the platform that we're building. So that automated decision takes all that legwork of taking maybe 3-4 spreadsheets and some screenshots from some production monitoring and APM platforms and whatever infrastructure tools you've got, and bringing all that into one room, in one space, and saying, what do we do? What can we do? What are our options? Having all of those decisions automated for you, number one, makes an application owner happy. Wow, I have options. This is great. I may choose to do none of these things. And by doing none of these things, I know the impact is going to be my cost is going to remain the same. If I do some of these things, I'm going to impact my cost, and maybe I'll impact my performance. And oh, by the way, over here, I didn't even know that I had a performance problem because I don't have insight into production. This is telling me that to solve that performance problem, I'll need to invest this much. And they can plan effectively to do those things. So automating those decisions, it not only gives them the tools and the insight to run their business, but it also gives those infrastructure teams the ability to not have to do that, to not provide that insight, to not have to think about it and make those decisions for them. So for infrastructure teams, or even a platform team, right? And I'll give you an example from one of my customers, a platform of OpenShift. They aren't chartered to do optimization. This platform team, they are chartered to deliver a service, to deliver a platform to those application owners, or to the people that are going to be running those applications. They don't have the time, they don't have the prioritization, and they don't have the budget to put together a platform that will make and automate those decisions, or even to provide that data, or to have a request management process to give that information to those platform consumers. So we said to them, well, what if we could do that for you? What if all you needed to do is instrument just one tiny little piece into your OCP clusters, your OpenShift clusters, and then automatically Turbonomic gathers that data, makes recommendations, and pushes those to Apptio. And your stakeholders, your platform users, your infrastructure, or solution owners will have that information at their fingertips without you having to do anything but put this one little piece into your cluster. Is that interesting to you? And suddenly the faces and the eyes light up, and they say, wow, that does sound interesting. That is powerful. If you could do that, we'd want to take a look at it.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of it is still, again, like Joe mentioned it earlier as well, like as sophisticated and automated we can make our tools, and obviously we'll continue to do that, and AI and all those type of things. It still often depends on getting it into the hands of the right people.
Right.
Right. And making sure that sponsorship is there, that kind of that light bulb moment goes off.
That's absolutely key. Is that sponsorship, somebody to say, look, we're doing this thing. Get on board.
And I think, again, where we can help is to bring those different personas into the mix. And I was talking at a conference last year, and someone like a strong, long Apptio customer on the finance side was like, I would like, she was going to use it as a stick. I'm not sure if that's the best approach, but anyway, she was like, give me that tomorrow. Like, I would love to see those things from Turbonomic, and I'll go and chase the fact that to make sure that's being actioned. And I think one thing that I've really, was kind of, hammered into me quite early on with Turbonomic, which I really like, is kind of the elasticity component of it. And the fact that it's not just going to tell you, hey, here's some potential savings, but equally, here's some necessary investments. And I think that's where, over time, it can bring that different angle as well. When, for example, we would integrate further through Turbo with Instana as well, to kind of say to the application owner, hey, Turbo is suggesting you to make these necessary investments. The reason why is also because we want to get your performance of your application up to a point that is, sustainable and decent. And here you kind of decided to invest, then you can see that your uptime of your application has benefited from that, right? So kind of to bring some of those value points and triggers into, again, those application or solution owners' hands as well.
You know what I'd like to see, Dieter, and this is like a perfect world for me, is you've got something like an order fulfillment program or an order fulfillment or a shopping cart page that you see that there is a certain amount of revenue month over month that it brings in, or day over day, or hour over hour. You could demonstrate that impact, or excuse me, that income or that revenue coming in, and then potentially you see a performance action around that solution somewhere, that if you take this action, you can immediately correlate that action being taken to an increase in revenue because that shopping cart page is more performant, or people aren't kicked out, or the orders weren't lost, right? And people didn't run away and never came back. That to me would be like the holy grail of this coming together, is saying, like, here's a direct impact of performance action from Turbonomic took, demonstrated very well by Apptio and encompassed by the total, the technology business management platform you've got already. Look at the goodness that these two solutions together have done for your business. I mean, showing that value immediately and directly like that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and look, that's something that I think we'll definitely try to mature to over time. Like realistically, we're probably still a little bit away from that, simply because.
Sure. I know I'm spouting off, great grand ideas.
No. But that, that's the forward thinking we definitely need, right? The only thing I would say is like, again, our starting point is typically like technology business management, focus on the cost side of it. Then, we have definitely our larger end of our customers who then see like the power of the platform and the fact that TBM is truly expandable into enterprise business management. And I bring EBM or enterprise business management back into it, because that's when you would start to get to those solutions that are not just purely IT-based solutions, but that are like your home lending application, right? And then once you have established the TCO of a home lending application, then, Greg, to your point, ultimately, again, those kind of trailblazers of customers will then want to get into bring the revenue of those things in as well, and look at a bit of a profitability of their app, solution, or product. Right. And when you get to that point, then definitely, if that thing is a fully kind of life cycle that a customer can look through, that'd be amazing. And I think that's where we're definitely going to head. And yeah.
So you're saying Q3. You heard it here first. Peter says Q3 fully delivered, GA, no problems, guys. But no, I mean, it's exciting. You're right, though. I mean, like it's and especially as a product manager, like you're obviously working on the here and now, but you're always thinking about the what's next, because you want to.
I don't think you put a year against the Q3, so that's good. You left the year off, so we can work with that.
It's fine. Well, Dieter, look, I know it's super early for you in the morning, and you probably have to work today, I assume. So we don't want to cut into too much of your time. And honestly, we could probably sit here and talk for hours more about
Yeah,
this
I got a
stuff.
lot more I want to know.
So again, we'd love to have you back on. Don't have to answer now,
Yep.
or you can say yes now and then say no later. That's fine too.
Was there a part?
Listeners will love you.
I cut out for a second, but were you suggesting a part 2, like a sequel?
Yeah, come back for a part 2. We'd love to have you. We can schedule it out. Because again, I think there's plenty more to sort of unpack and uncover here.
Definitely.
And that would be amazing. So thank you for the
sign
time.
me up, and once we have a part 2, I'll come with something that Jeremy, my peer on the Turbo side, and I've accomplished from a product perspective, and I'll be able to show you.
Joe?
We'll bring Jeremy on.
Yeah, a double.
Yeah, a combo.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Well, something to look forward to.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And Greg, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but I think this might be first red hoodie, Greg, we've had on the podcast.
Yes, this is the
first
red hoodie.
It has to be a new hoodie.
Apptio is kind of like a red color, isn't it?
It's orange.
Yeah, orange, yeah.
You know, in the right light, this could be orange.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fine. That's fine. Yeah. But no, listen, again, as always, we appreciate everyone's time for hanging out with us, for watching. For more great info, check out the community pages. And we look forward to the next one. And Dieter, we'll definitely get this next one scheduled, and I think that'll be fantastic. But have a great weekend, everyone. Enjoy your Friday, Dieter, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.